All right. So most everybody got that correct. Okay, so number three, I think the only reason why you got it incorrect was because the way it was worded. I might have to simplify that one a little bit because I think the other class got a lot of that wrong too. And then prime cost, I think actually the reason why most of y'all got it wrong is because why? Why do you think? Because prime cost is food, beverage, and labor. We talked about in class. And on the quiz, it says only food and labor. So I might need to update that one as well. Let me make a note of these. 7 and 3. Awesome. 100%. Excellent on most of them. Good. All right. Let's talk about chapter 3. Let's move along. So just a heads up, in class this week on Wednesday, we are going to do a recipe costing analysis. Okay, so we're going to be introducing the costing analysis for recipes. And we are going to be costing out the cost of a cupcake. All right. And then I will be bringing cupcakes in. So if you get the answer correct, then you can get a cupcake. All right. So I feel like I have to tell people that online because otherwise I forget to tell you I'm actually bringing food. So that may sway your decision to come in person or not. As I've had some students in the past that told me they would have come in had they known we were going to have food in class. So doing my due diligence there. All right, let's talk about chapter 3. Give me one moment to get logged in. Show a thumbs up. Yes, thumbs down for no. Was that review helpful? Was that format helpful? Okay, I see some mostly thumbs up. I don't have a whole lot of those developed for this class, but every semester I improve in some way. Food and beverage cost control. Chapter 3. All right, so some of this might be a little bit repetitive, but that's okay. Let's jump into chapter 3. All right. What is food cost? How would you describe food cost?
Financial expense of consumable goods.
Okay, so the expense of the goods that people are consuming. Good. What else? Any other way of saying that? When does that money, okay, let's say I buy a 50-pound bag of flour. Okay. Does that automatically go into my food cost?
Depends.
That whole bag of flour, it goes right into my food cost. What do you think? Yes, thumbs up, thumbs down, or thumbs sideways for I'm not sure what you're asking. All right, the answer is no. That unless we take that whole 50-pound bag and dump it into a mixer and use it all at once, it doesn't go into our food cost. Items only go into our food cost when we sell them, when they're used in production to be sold. Okay. So it only becomes part of our food cost when it goes into production. Okay. So if I buy, let's say I'm going to go an easy route and I use refried beans in a can. Okay. And so if I take my refried beans, if I buy a case that has 6 cans in it, and I only use one can, and the other 5 are sitting in my inventory, is that all 6 cans part of my food cost? No, just that one can, right? The rest of it's still in my inventory. So as long as it's on the shelf and still in inventory, I'm not going to count it as part of my food cost. So that's the biggest thing is you have to remember that food only becomes part of food cost when it is actually used in production. So this is a basic, very basic formula for figuring out what our food cost is, okay? So we take our beginning inventory, okay? How many of you, by a show of hands, have ever done inventory at your workplaces? Okay, Jaden, right? Jaden, tell us about what was that process like to take inventory, and where were you taking inventory?
Um, Taking inventory, well, we did both. Well, we did the server side and then our kitchen side, so we would go into our walk-in account, whatever we have, our food items, and then put that on our checklist. And then we would go over to our dry storage area and check all the utensils, all the plates, all the to-go stuff, and we would also put that on our checklist, and then we would give it to our manager, or sometimes we would just do the order ourselves.
Okay, yeah. So when we're taking our inventory, do you have anything different to add?
No,
That's about it? Okay, cool. So when we're taking that inventory, essentially what we're doing is I'm counting how many of each item I have, and then I can associate a dollar amount. So I can associate a dollar amount of how much that inventory costs, right? And so we calculate first our beginning inventory, and then if we purchase things during our period, do those purchases add to or take away from our inventory? They add to. So what are we going to do? We're going to add them. So we're going to add the purchases for the period, and that gives us our total available inventory. That means for that particular period, that's how much inventory we total had on hand. Okay. And then if it's still in inventory, does it become part of our food cost? No, it does not. So what do we have to do with our ending inventory? We have to subtract it. And that gives us our costs of goods sold. The cost of the goods that we actually sold. Okay. So let's go over it one more time. We start with our beginning inventory. Let me give you an example using this shelf right over here in the classroom. Okay. Before y'all come into class, I can count how many each of the items are and how much each item costs. And I can figure out a dollar amount of inventory that's on that shelf. Okay. And then you guys come into class and you eat food. Okay, you go over there, get some snacks, which you're totally welcome to do. Once I restock it, there's kind of old snacks right now, but once I restock it, go over there, get a couple snacks. And then after you leave, I can take an inventory again. That's the ending inventory. And I can figure out the dollar amount of snacks that you guys ate for this class. Does that make sense? So let's do some actual math. Let's do some actual numbers. So in January, we started with $3,500 in inventory. Okay. We purchased $10,000 during that period. So, what is our total available inventory?
I mean,
Well, 13.
13,500, right? We're going to add these two numbers together. Good. And then I go in and I count all my inventory. I put a dollar amount to it. And it actually costs $2,500, the ingredients that are still in inventory. So because remember, I haven't used them yet, they're still in inventory. That means I did not use it to sell those items, which means I can't calculate it in my costs because it's not part of my food cost yet. So by subtracting 2,500, what is my cost of goods sold?
11,000.
11,000. Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay. This 11,000 Let's connect it to a previous class. This 11,000 is what we put in the top portion of our triangle. That's the cost. Okay. And then what's in the bottom? Percent and sales. Which means, where do I find this number? If I find the 11,000 by doing this formula, where do I find the number for my sales? What's that?
The percentage cost.
Well, we don't know the percentage yet, right? This is actual. In the previous class, we're planning on what kind of percentage we wanted to have. So we have the percentage in mind. But now we're trying to find out what is the actual percentage. Did we meet up with our actual goal? Okay. So 11,000 comes from this formula. That's my cost. Where do my sales? How do I find my sales number? What do you think?
From ending inventory, because that's the amount sold.
Not our ending inventory. Nope. Has nothing to do with this formula up here. If you want to know how much you sold in sales, where would you find that information?
Where it's corroborated end of day, it might be register, it might be managed computer, it might be some other equipment.
Okay, so we can simplify that and say in the computer system, right? If we're putting all of our orders into a computer system, we can just go to the computer system and it tells us what our sales is. Okay, and then once we know what that sales number is, then we can find the actual percentage. Okay, and if we wanted to have a percentage of 33%, but based on this numbers, we ended up with 34%, then we know something is off and we have to take corrective action. Okay, trying to pull it all together. All right, let's do this next one. What is our beginning inventory for March of 2019?
Unknown.
What's that?
Known.
It's not unknown. Let's go back to February of 2019. What is our beginning inventory for March 2019? What's that? Why? You're correct. It is 2,500, but why?
Because that's what you ended with?
Exactly. Did we do any business between February 28th and March 1st? Or sorry, yeah, February 28th and March 1st? Probably not. So whatever our ending inventory is, that becomes our new beginning inventory. Okay? That becomes our new beginning inventory. And then we repeat the process. Add them together. What is our total available inventory? 17,000. All right. And then because we go back in and we count $3,500 is still in inventory, we're going to subtract that and get
15,500.
13,500. Right? Is the cost of my goods sold. Is there a difference between February cost of goods sold and March cost of goods sold?
Yes.
Okay. What could account for that extra cost in goods sold? Right? The cost is higher.
February is a shorter month.
February has 21 days, March has 31. So that's 3 extra days. So that could potentially account for that extra cost. What else? What happens in March that doesn't happen in February? I mean, I think you guys would obviously know. Spring break? Are y'all not already counting down the days of spring break? I am. Oh my gosh, we're in week 2. This is week 3, actually, right? No.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is week 3.
3.
So then we have 5 more weeks till spring break. Holy cow. Right? Especially if you're in a flex class, then that means your class is done after spring break. Anyway, sorry. So spring break happens in March. So maybe March might be a little bit busier than February. Okay? We might plan for things to be really busy, but then what happens if we have an ice storm like we had last weekend and a half ago? We might plan to be really busy on a day. We order all this product, and then all of a sudden, the ice storm happens, and then we don't have the business that we thought, right? We're going to talk in a later chapter about how maybe we're not gonna order as much product the next time we order to even it all out, right? But hopefully some of those items that we ordered are not so perishable that they won't go bad before we have an opportunity to sell them. Okay. Or maybe we lose power and our refrigeration goes down and we have to throw all that food out. Okay. There's lots of different factors um, could contribute to the rising of costs. Okay. So you as a manager have to understand and remember what there is, why those costs, be able to explain those costs to your higher ups, either your owners, your investors, or whoever. Okay. So the one thing we're going to be looking at specifically, if you wanted that formula we just talked about is a very generalized, okay? Very generalized in this is the cost of our goods that we sold. Everything that we sold, this is how much it cost us to produce that. Now, if we want to go even further and do food cost and beverage cost, we have to divide those different costs. So all the ingredients that are associated with making food become part of our food cost. All the ingredients that are associated with making beverages go to our beverage costs. Okay. So sometimes we have to transfer. Who can give me an example of a time that we might use a liquid ingredient in the kitchen?
Milk.
Milk, okay, for
Cake.
okay, to make a cake. Good. What else?
Making a vodka sauce.
Making a vodka sauce, right? So we're adding that vodka to the tomato sauce to make the vodka sauce good. What else? Come on,
Extracts.
what's that?
Extracts.
Okay, so extracts typically are bought
Oh.
for the kitchen, right?
Wait.
Think about things that are bought for the bar.
Oh.
Beverages are usually consumed that are now part of a food cost because they're making a food recipe.
Citrus.
Say that?
Citrus.
So- Okay, so hold on to that for a moment. We're gonna go the opposite direction with that.
Sometimes beer.
Sometimes beer, right? So like a beer battered onion rings or fish, whatever, right? The cost of those liquid ingredients have to be transferred over to the kitchen as a cost because it's producing food. Okay. We might go the opposite way. What are some examples of some food items that might be used in the production of a drink?
Cherries, olives.
Cherries, okay, olives, what else?
I said citrus.
Citrus, right? So like things that think about like garnishes for beverages, whether it's mixed drinks or mocktails, or things that might go into like strawberry smoothies, right? So the cost of those strawberries, which are normally food items, they come into the kitchen, they have to be transferred to the bar so you can get an accurate food and beverage cost, okay? We might also have to transfer from other units. So let me give you an example, and maybe you can think of another example while I'm talking. When I worked at Chester's Hamburgers, that was my high school job. I worked at the one in Universal City off of Pat Booker Road, okay? And sometimes the other stores, maybe they were busier than they thought they were going to be. And so they were running short on meat. So they would call my manager and they'd say, hey, do you have 2 boxes of meat you can spare and 3 packages of buns? Okay. So my manager would look at our business volume, how much time we have left till closing. And then they go and check our inventory and they say, yes, we can. We can send those to you. David, I love to drive. I love to go deliver. Plus, they would always give me free food if I did that. So it saved me money. And so I would take the 2 boxes of meat and the 3 packages of buns over to 410, and then I'd come back to my store, right? Well, the cost of that meat and buns has to be transferred to that other store Because what would happen is obviously they're getting more sales, right? Because they have more product. So their sales are going to go up, but their cost is going to stay super low if we don't transfer that money. Whereas my store, I'm not selling as much, so my sales aren't going to be very high, but my costs are going to go higher because we can't account for those 2 boxes of meat. So that's why we have to transfer and have that accounting to make sure we have valid numbers, okay, in that costing. It all comes down to the accounting. Okay, let's go back. Standardized recipes. What is a standardized recipe? If you were going to tell your 5-year-old sibling to describe a 5-year-old sibling, Eduardo, how would you describe a standardized recipe?
Um, uh, Basic recipe, like what you exactly want every time to create.
Okay, so it helps create the same thing, the same result every single time. Okay, Ray, how would you describe a standardized recipe to a child so they would understand it?
Rules for everybody to follow to create repeatable results.
There you go. Excellent. The rules for everyone to follow, so that way you create the same thing over and over again. Okay. List of ingredients and the step-by-steps that you take in order to get that accomplished result. Okay. To accomplish that result. So we already discovered why we have a standardized recipe, because we want to have that same result every single time. But why else might we have a standardized recipe?
Calculate food costs to know what you'll need on hand to make the recipe.
Good. To be able to calculate our food cost. And then also, so we know how much product to have on hand in order, so we know how much to order and have on hand so we can produce that and sell that. Okay, good. What else? Why else might we need standardized recipes?
It's the same for the customers every time.
So it tastes the same to the customers every single time. How many of y'all ever go to your favorite restaurant and ever ask, like, who's cooking in the kitchen today? Because sometimes if Johnny's cooking, the steak comes out perfect. But if somebody else is cooking, it doesn't quite taste the same, right? And so you're just like, well, the guests shouldn't have to ask who's in the kitchen cooking today, because everything should taste the same all the time, right? So that standardized recipes allows us to produce that every single time. How many of you ever been to a place and they changed the recipe? Okay, tell us about that.
Like watching Whataburger get worse and worse over the years after it was bought out by that out-of-state company.
Okay, cool. So they changed something about the ingredients. What else? Specific example?
Restaurant in downtown. I can't remember the name. I can't pronounce it. It's a Mexican restaurant.
Is it Mi Tierra?
Yeah, that one.
Okay.
Yeah,
They changed their recipe on something?
they changed it a long time ago. It used to be different.
Okay. One of my least favorite examples, because I wish they would bring them back, is Chili's used to have the best chicken crispers, like the best chicken tenders. I don't know what they did to them. It was different. It was more of like a tempura batter than it was like a traditional breading. And they changed it, and it's just never been the same since. Right. And so sometimes when we change our recipes, our guests get disappointed. And so we have to remember that as we're changing those standardized recipes. But sometimes we change them to save on costs. Right. So using that Whataburger example was what we call quick service restaurants, QSRs. Okay. It sounds better than saying fast food, but it's quick service restaurants. Okay. In quick service restaurants, they are trying to maximize their profit. They're not selling their product at the higher price like a full service sit down restaurant, although some of them actually pretty are. Their prices are getting pretty expensive, but they are constantly trying to find new vendors to provide their products at the least amount of cost. And so sometimes that does sacrifice quality, and then people get disappointed. So when we are looking for the recipe, We are looking for quality versus quantity. Those two product specifications, quality and quantity. Okay. So, Amaya, give us an ingredient that you might use in the kitchen, a very general ingredient.
Wow.
Flour. Okay, good. So our ingredient is flour. What are some different qualities or different types of flour?
Bleach dry whole wheat cake flour.
Okay, let's go one at a time so other people can have a chance to answer. Give me your top one, Kenneth.
AP.
Okay, all-purpose flour. Good. Anybody else?
Self-rising.
Self-rising. Anybody online?
Oat flour.
Okay, oat flour.
Bread
Good. Anybody else online? Or anybody else in
Bread
here?
flour.
Bread flour. Good.
Almond flour?
Almond flour. Good. So as you can see, there's different types of flour. What dictates what type of flour we use? The recipe. That dictates and tell us what we can or cannot use. Okay. The quantity is how much we buy. So all-purpose flour we may buy in 50 to 100-pound bags. Okay. But something like almond flour, if I'm not using it as frequently, I may buy it in a 5-pound bag. So that tells us how much that recipe helps us know how much to order and what type of things to order. Okay. Is there a substitution for bread flour?
All purpose.
Okay, but did you get the exact same result with all-purpose and bread flour? No, but can you, and this is a general question of general interest, can you doctor up all-purpose flour to make it similar to bread flour?
Yeah, you like add baking soda.
Don't you add like, yeah, baking soda or something like that? I think there's a way that you can doctor it up to be able to give the similar results, right? I'm the hotel guy. I'm not like the baking person, but if we use apples, let's say we're making apple pie. Does it matter if I use Granny Smith or yellow delicious apples?
Yes.
Absolutely. Why?
Different textures.
The different textures, different flavors, right? Granny Smith has that tart crispness that holds up in a pie. Yellow delicious is kind of mushy. Okay. But if I'm making caramel apples, does it matter if I use red delicious or Granny Smith?
Yes.
Flavor wise
Not
and
really.
texture.
Flavor wise, Granny Smith and yellow, or sorry, Granny Smith and red delicious, they're very similar in crispness, right? Granny Smith is just slightly more crisp, a little bit more tart than a red delicious, right? And so, but they hold up the similar. So if we're making like caramel apples, then maybe we could get away with using red apples instead of green apples. Okay. But if we're making a pie, we got to be very specific. And that's what your recipe is going to tell you, whether you can substitute things or not. Right? Our portion size. This is how we're going to control cost based on our recipes. If our recipe says we get 32 servings, then guess what? We need to get 32 servings. If we only get 30 servings, then that means my cost is going to go up, but I'm going to miss the sale on those last 2 servings, which means my sales are going to come down. And so if my recipe says I need to get 32 servings out of it, I better get 32 servings out of it. Okay? Because that's what we've used to figure out how much we're going to sell our item for. Okay? So we can control our portion size. I'll give you an example. A couple summers ago, we were up in Artemisia's. I was helping out with the service of a lunch, and they were doing a chimichurri steak. So they had the steak, and then they had a chimichurri sauce. And there was a student using a big metal spoon, like the giant metal spoons that you use for stirring, right? And the first couple plates went out with a big scoop of chimichurri on there. And I was like, hold on, guys, wait a minute. We have 40 servings. We're not going to have enough chimichurri sauce if you serve it like that. We need to get a different spoon. Okay. I said it 3 times. And every time I went back to get new plates, guess what? Same size spoon. So at that point, I thought, you know what? I've given my opinion 3 times. They're not listening. So now we get to find out the hard way. And the last 8 guests got no chimichurri sauce. And the 10 guests before them got like a little tiny bit. But man, if you're one of those guests that was the first 5 plates that went out, you got a big old helping of chimichurri sauce. Okay. So, couple of things. We either need to figure out, redo our recipe. If we're going to give more sauce, we have to redo our recipe. It's going to change our cost. Or we need to use portion control. Okay. And sauces are going to be more things on volume. So you might get an ounce of sauce or 2 ounces of sauces. What are some items that we measure by weight when we're controlling our controlling our portions? What are some things we control by weight? Proteins is the primary one. Protein, so you get like a quarter pound burger, an 18-ounce steak. That's all associated by weight. We could also do sides. So you might get like 4 ounces of potato salad. And that's like 4 ounces of weight. Okay. All the stuff from the deli, how they put the stuff on the scale, and then they put the stuff in it, and then you pay by the ounce or pay by the pound. Okay. Volume or sauces, what else? Things that could be served by volume.
Drinks.
Sorry?
Drinks.
Drinks, absolutely. So if we have juice, you might get 6 ounces if you order a small juice, or you might get 8 ounces if you order a large juice. So that cup size is going to tell us how much of that liquid, how much volume. What else? Anything else by volume?
Soup.
Soup, good. So we might have a cup of soup, we might have a bowl of soup. Okay? This is not to not to get you all jaded on going out to eat and spending money on food. The average difference between a cup of soup and a bowl of soup is anywhere between 2 to 3 ounces. So your cup might be about 6 ounces of soup, and your bowl might be 8 ounces of soup. Okay, they're served in 2 different containers, so it looks like a different volume, which it is, like 2 ounces more. But what's the price difference, the selling price difference between a cup of soup and a bowl of soup? It's pretty significant, right? So when you buy a bowl of soup, you're only going to get like this much more, but you're paying a higher price. So that's would be considered like an upsell. Someone asks for a soup. If our servers can sell the bowl, then we can probably get a little bit more profit from that. Okay. If you think about the difference in French fries between a medium and a large, what is the difference between a medium and a large? It's probably not that much, right? But what's that extra price that goes in? If you want to upsize your fries, it's an extra what? 35, 55, 65 cents to make that larger so maybe you can have larger fries. The volume and the amount of fries isn't probably going to be that much, but you're paying a little bit more. So that's a way for the restaurants to make up a little bit more in their profit. Okay. What about count?
4 or 5 count chicken strip.
Okay, so chicken strips. I'm gonna put like chicken strips. I'm gonna put appetizers. So chicken strips, mozzarella sticks, potato skins, wings, all those are typically done by count, unless the wings are done by weight. Sometimes wings are done by weight. Okay. What else can be done by count? think about something you might order, and there's an ingredient that is like specific number, a specific count of an item on that dish.
Shrimp.
Okay, so shrimp. Okay, cool. So let's do an example. Let's do a visual real quick. I have my plate right here. I'm gonna do 4 ounces of salad. That is weight. Right? We good so far? Okay. Then I'm gonna do 3 tomato wedges. And 4, oops. Four cucumbers. Okay. And 3 croutons. Those are all done by count. And then what's the volume?
The dressing.
The salad dressing. Good. Okay. So the salad dressing over here on the side, ranch. This is our volume. So this one recipe, then this is a recipe for salad. Okay, so that way, if all of us order a side salad, when it all comes out, it looks exactly the same. So we have volume, weight, and count in this one recipe. Okay. What happens if, I'll just use myself as an example. Okay. What happens if I'm in a hurry and I just take a handful of croutons and sprinkle them on there instead of counting 3 croutons and placing them where they're supposed to be placed? Does that add to the cost? Yeah. But do I add this, do I increase the selling price? Hey, my table, I'm sorry, I was in a real big hurry. I gave you more croutons. So I'm gonna go ahead and jack up your price an extra 50 cents. No, we sell it for the same amount, but our cost goes up because we're using more ingredients. Okay. So it's really important when we have those standardized recipes that it's really important that we follow them so that when the guests get their food, it tastes the same because we use the same ingredients and it looks the same. We're not gonna, yes, we were gonna worry about that. So when we cost out our standardized recipes, we have to remember that volume and weight are not always equal. What do I mean by that? Volume and weight are not always equal.
A cup of something doesn't always weigh the same depending on what you're weighing or
Yeah.
what you're measuring.
What is the volume of 1 cup?
1 cup.
Well, what's the volume in ounces for 1 cup?
Oh, uh,
8 ounces, right? Does 8 ounces of flour weigh 8 ounces? Does 1 cup of flour weigh 8 ounces? Does 1 cup of brown sugar weigh 8 ounces? No. Okay. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm 99.9999996% sure that the only thing that has an equal conversion is water. So 1 cup of water actually weighs 8 ounces. I feel like I remember that one time because a pint is what? 16 ounces, right? And so a pound is also 16 ounces. I remember someone told me one time when I was hiking that 1 pint of water weighs a pound. So you can know how much weight you're carrying when you know how much water you're carrying. That's a little side note. Anyways, so volume and weight don't always match. When we go through the project, which I'm going to introduce in about 2 weeks, when we go through the project, I'm going to actually give you a website that will help you convert volume to weight. And so if we have 1 cup of flour, it will actually help you convert that to the weight of that flour instead of using that volume. Okay. Because we buy flour by the pound, right? We buy 50 pounds of flour. We don't buy 45 cups of flour. Okay. We buy it by the pound, but we measure it often by the cups for standardized like home recipes. And so because our units don't match pounds and cups, we have to figure out a conversion for that. Ray, what were you gonna say?
if a pint of water weighs a pound, That's interesting because that's 16 ounces in a pint and a pound is 16 ounces.
Yeah, so I think water is the only one that has that equal conversion of volume and weight is actually the same. Because even things like molasses, right? It weighs more than water does. It's more viscous. But you might also have things that are less viscous than water that maybe don't weigh the same. Okay, so volume and weight are not always equal. Just remember that. We're going to work on this next class. We're going to skip over this for right now. All right. So converting our as purchased, AP, it means as purchased, to our edible portions. This is where we're going to talk about yield. We're going to talk about yield. Okay. We brought this up very briefly on the first day of class. We talked about the tomato and making a tomato concasse. Okay. So we're going to use this triangle again, but we're using it a little bit differently. Okay. We're going to use it a little bit differently. How are we doing on time? Okay, 20 minutes. We're good. All right. So what does the horizontal line represent? Division. And the vertical line represents multiplication. Those stay the same. Okay. The other thing that stays the same is percentage. We're going to call that yield percentage. Okay. Or it could be called edible yield. That is horrible. Let me see if I can read you that a little bit nicer. Yield percentage and edible yield. Oops. And blue. Yeah. Okay, edible yield. Then on the top, we're going to have edible portion. So EP is our edible portion. That's how much we actually get to eat. On the bottom, we're going to have as purchased, AP. So when that 15-pound box of tomatoes comes into my restaurant, do I get to sell all 15 pounds? No, I have to core them, right? Now, if I'm going to core them and slice them into wedges to put on the salad, my yield's going to be pretty high because all I'm going to be doing is coring them and maybe throwing out the tomatoes that are bad, okay? Or cutting off the sections that are bad. But if I'm making, I don't know, tomato concasse to make tomato sauce, I also have to take into consideration the cost or the weight of the core, the skin, the seeds, all of that weighs something. So my yield is actually going to be less from that same tomato. Okay. So what our recipe is telling us to use will determine how much product we actually get out of that. Okay. So let's use this as our examples for bell peppers. Our AP is 10 pounds. So we start with 10 pounds of bell peppers. At the end, I've cored them, I've de-seeded them. I took the tops off, took the bottoms off, lined them up nice and neat so I can do a really nice julienne and then a really fine dice. So it's all uniform. I have 8.5 pounds left. Okay, so using our formula here, which one are we looking for? Our edible yield, right? So we cover that up and what's left over? EP divided by AP. Edible portion divided by as purchased, 8.5 pounds divided by 10 pounds. And this gives me what? 0.85, which is a percentage, which converts it to 85%. So I have an 85% edible yield. We good so far? So now, what happens if I buy 25 pounds of bell peppers? How much product should I have left over in order to to figure out how much product I have to sell? What is my edible yield? What is it? 85%. Excellent. And so now I can figure out what my edible portion is. If I look for my edible portion, I cover it up, and what's left over? The yield times the as purchased. So in this case, I'm going to do 25 pounds of bell peppers times 0.85, because that's my edible yield. And I get
21.25.
20,
21.25.
21.75? 25, thank you. Okay. So if my recipe calls for 22 pounds of bell peppers, am I okay just ordering 25 pounds?
What'd you say? Sorry.
If my recipe calls for 22 pounds of bell peppers, am I good with ordering just 25 pounds? Yes or no? No. Why?
Fine.
Because we only get 21.25 after we've chopped the tops off, after we've cored them, taken the seeds out. So if my recipe calls for 22 pounds, and I only end up with 21 pounds after ordering 25, that means I have to order more. We're gonna talk about that in just a second. Okay? So if my yield is 85%, now if I need 35 pounds, I need 35 pounds. How much do I order? So what am I looking for in this case? The AP. I need 35 pounds to serve. Okay? So I cover up the AP, and what's left over? Edible portion divided by the percentage. So in this case, we have edible portion divided by my 85%. So what is 35 divided by 0.85?
41.2.
40,
41.2.
41.2. So I need to order at least 41.2 pounds. So when I'm done processing them, chopping them, whatever, I have 35 pounds left over. Okay? So this is really crucial, especially if you're going into catering. Because oftentimes in catering, you're serving a certain number of guests, and you want to make sure you have enough ingredients to serve those guests. And if it says you need to order 25 pounds of bell peppers, and you order exactly 25 pounds of bell peppers, by the time you are done processing them in the prep stage, you're actually going to have less product. So you won't have enough to serve all of your guests. All right. Questions, comments, concerns? All right, so we have just 13 minutes, which we're going to get ready, and we're going to knock out this explanation. Actually, I take that back. We're going to talk about it on Wednesday. Okay, we're going to end it right here. On Wednesday, we are going to be doing some math. Okay, so we're going to be doing using this edible portion, this AP, the yield percentage, to do some math for a catering assignment, and then also costing out a recipe. Okay, so that's what we'll be doing on Wednesday. Thank you all so much. I'll see you then. Let me do attendance before we leave though, just to make sure I got everybody. This is section